Hello, and thank you for viewing my presentation. My name is India McClary, and I am presenting in the Health and Wellness portion of our Sanford Conference. Today I'm going to discuss exploring American food deserts, problems and solutions for families in urban and rural landscapes. So, within this presentation, I'm going to use a lot of terminology that is specifically related to food deserts and food related issues um, within within our community. One of those terms is food fairness, and that term is used when you are thinking about the the equal opportunity of families in our country as far as having the access to something that everyone should have access to because we have good amounts of it to go around. One of those things is clean water, fresh water. This is not just an American issue, but another important one is fresh food. And so, is it fair for citizens who earn below livable income to be made to go grocery shopping at their local convenience store instead of a grocery store with options for fruits and vegetables and fresh meats and things other than shelf stable items that contain a lot of preservatives, salt, um, fat, and sugar? Is it fair that because I live below a certain income level that I can't have access to that healthy food, even if I only am going to use a small amount of my income on it? Is it fair that I don't have that choice? So, food fairness is a term I might use a lot or a bit throughout this presentation. So I just wanted to put the term in and let everyone know what that means. So, what is a food desert specifically? A food desert is a term used to describe, it's supposed to represent a lack of accessibility to fresh fruit and vegetables and affordable produce. The term food desert is a powerful one because it illustrates the desire and need for vegetation in these areas that lack resources. The term is supposedly coined around 1990 by a tenant of a subsidized housing project in Scotland. He was speaking at a town meeting and was trying to convey to other people the consequences of the lack of resources for food and fresh produce in his neighborhood. And he used the term food desert, allegedly. It implies the drought of a necessity, the word food desert. It needs to be understood that this is a continued drought in a basic human need, and healthy food is a basic human need. It results in negative consequences for those living in the food deserts. And we're going to go through a lot of those consequences throughout this presentation. And we're also going to discuss some solutions. Food deserts explained. Now, although this may be new on a national level, many families with low income in urban and rural areas have dealt with this problem for decades. The study of potential accessibility and affordability of fresh foods and vegetables in areas of poverty in America is a relatively new focus in our society. The United States Department of Agriculture reports 23.5 million Americans are living in what is known as a food desert in this country, with exponentially more than half of those families and individuals living in poverty. And that is a direct correlation that we will discuss a lot through this presentation. Poverty and the lack of accessibility. Who is affected by food deserts? The general answer is everyone is affected. While we're all indirectly affected by the residual problems food deserts create, things like healthcare, long-term healthcare issues, the cost of those diseases like diabetes and hypertension. The two main factors that determine if you are a food desert inhabitant are your geographic location and economic status. Pretty much where you live and how much money you make. Many urban cities have people living in clusters of small neighborhood food deserts in what combines to be a massive food desert. You know, what happens here is that you have a lot of small neighborhoods that are kind of separated, but none of them will have a store between them. And they'll all still be going out 5, 10, 15 miles, 20 miles away from their home to go grocery shopping. And so that combines it to a massive food desert, and you end up having a whole west side or north side or south side of town be a food desert, where you'll see 2 grocery stores in a large area of a city. So while those impoverished families living in the rural and urban areas are most affected, families who are above the poverty line but still live in a food desert, that family exists as well. That's also a place for a lot of people, a place where I'm not quite deemed to be living in poverty or be below the poverty line. Technically, I still can't live in an area where 85% of my salary is going to go to my housing. So you live somewhere that's more comfortable from an economic standpoint for you to support your family in a decent way. So you're above the poverty line, but you still live in some of those areas that may suffer and have be in a food desert. And so that is when you have to utilize your citizenship. You have to organize with your neighbors and speak to that public official, speak to that alderman, speak to your local government to make change. There is strength in numbers, so you can have the people that are living in poverty that have no choice but to live in that area, and the same people that live in that area with hopes that they can sustain living there with their car because they can still drive out of the area. But it's a shame that you have to drive out of your area to get things. That's the issue. And so these groups really need to combine and because we're all neighbors, and go ahead and speak to that local government about making changes. So now I'm going to discuss the populations that are directly affected by food deserts. We are all affected, but there are 4 subgroups that are directly affected and really need some immediate change in the situation so that the long-term effects will not continue for generations to come. I'm also going to introduce another term that many people may or may not have heard before, and that is a food imbalance. Food imbalances happen when there's more one category or type of food in abundance than the other types. And most of the time it's a negative thing because the food imbalance leans towards the direction of unhealthy processed foods as opposed to having an abundance of fruits and vegetables. There that could be the case in some areas, but unfortunately not most. So food deserts and food imbalances are kind of hand in hand, and they're seen predominantly in minority areas of cities. For example, in Chicago, Illinois, a study done by Gallagher and Associates was conducted on food deserts and found that in nearly all African American dominant communities, a food desert exists. And this issue for African Americans correlates to the other inequities faced by this racial group. Things like their education, opportunities, income, income level, and unemployment. So that's another just factor that really can affect a group and is really affecting African Americans. If you don't have access to healthy food, you don't have as much access to quality education or the variety of job opportunities within your neighborhoods and within your communities, then those are, mounting issues that can really deter masses of people. And that's really unfortunate. Food really, none of them should exist, but access to food really shouldn't be something that is taking people, that is changing lives in a negative way, that is halting opportunity for groups, because it is available. So it's all about accessing that food. Low-income Latino American families are also affected. They have to support families on small salaries, but then they often have a harder time than their white and African American counterparts receiving certain government programs, benefits like SNAP or the WIC programs that help give low-income families money for food. They have a lot of programs available, but it is only available for small groups, and it's not available for everyone here. And different laws, citizenship issues halt people from being able to get that as assistance that they really need. Another population I want to discuss is single parents, particularly mothers, and their children are at highest risk of negatively being affected by these food deserts. When you are a single parent, a majority of single parents live in a lower income bracket, either initially or after divorce or for whatever reason. And so that's one income in the home that has to take care of all the necessities. And sometimes the families really suffer when it comes to food. If you have to pay a bill or keep heat on versus food, you're going to buy the cheapest food that you can get. And that is a reality, not just for single parents, but it really affects that population. Mothers are also family members at high risk of disease or illness stemming from poor nutrition, often the result of living in food deserts. Another population to discuss that are directly affected by food deserts are senior citizens. Senior citizens living in food deserts are also at an increased risk of health issues such as diabetes and substantially high blood pressure that are directly related to lack of healthy foods. Often seniors who live alone and in food deserts struggle with having the mobility to get themselves around in order to get to the grocery stores. Seniors living in food deserts also have to make crucial decisions when purchasing food at all or buying their medications that are vital to their existence. This decision is made worse by the fact that they often have to resort to utilizing food pantries to supplement their food supply further. And that reduces the amount of fresh produce that, being that many pantries are mostly non-perishable food items and very limited fresh produce. So it's not just seniors that have limited mobility. There are many ways that limited mobility um, affects people within the parameters of food deserts. Limited mobility means limited access. Mobility and transportation issues are not just problems for our seniors. Those in rural area food deserts of this country have major disadvantage when it comes to accessing healthy foods. The fact of the matter is, many and most of the affected rural areas are farm communities, and while they feed us, they cannot feed their own families. Due to the lack of higher paying employment and minimal public transportation in these areas, many families and individuals in rural food deserts experience the effects in a way that is more discouraging than those living in the urban food desert settings. Food pa- Not having fresh food as a part of a regular diet is the fastest way to diminish your health and create preventable health issues. Two of the major issues are hypertension and diabetes. Families and individuals living in these areas are at higher risk of obesity related diseases, potential development problems, and often create generational patterns of poor food choices, causing the cycle to perpetuate. When families experience food imbalance, where more fast food and processed food items are accessible than healthy food options, like I discussed earlier, that family's chances of experiencing preventable but fatal health issues increase dramatically. Obesity increases risk factors for many related health problems like cardiovascular disease, hypertension, high blood pressure, and diabetes. Reducing effects of diabetes with proper. So now let's talk about solutions. We've talked about where food deserts are located, who's affected by them most, what they are, and the many challenges faced by the people living within them. So let's talk about what we can do to help eliminate these problems. Community gardens seems like a really viable option, and that's just simply putting gardens within food desert communities, that grows different fruits and vegetables. But studies have shown there needs to be much effort and resources available for this to be a choice that is really going to make change, which means the local government needs to provide access to the tools and soil and things necessary to grow that garden as a part of maybe, taxes, as a part of us paying our taxes. This should be available with equipment to use, and the community also needs to be available and learn the best ways to do this to make it a really viable choice. So together, combining that effort and resources, it could really be something that would eradicate food deserts and eliminate this issue. Solutions to the food desert problem need to be created swiftly, as the impact on families and individuals is a harmful one. Families and individuals living in these areas are at higher risk of obesity related diseases, potential developmental problems, and often create generational patterns of poor choices when it comes to food, perpetuating that cycle. Research has also shown education on making healthy food choices, as well as knowledge on the varieties of produce and just how to prepare them, it can make a difference in how parents prepare and choose their food, which of course goes back to that generational pattern of making food choices. In fact, studies have shown just parents learning new tips and tricks in the kitchen with how to utilize certain fruits and vegetables that they may not be have been so familiar with. It significantly decreased their body mass index of their children in many studies. So that's a real thing that can happen to make a quick, or maybe not so quick, but a easy choice, a easy change within families. Just learning a couple of healthier ways to make your family favorites, utilizing more fruit and vegetables and less, processed food or fats, you know. And to talk about briefly something done on a celebrity level, the guy in the right hand corner, the gentleman in the right hand corner, is an actor. And he was on, I believe, CSI Miami, or one of those CSI shows. He's also an actor in Hollywood, and he's made lots of movies. He is from New Orleans, and he actually did create a large chain. He created a large chain of grocery stores in order to, and convenience markets throughout New Orleans in the most needy areas. And that was to bring fresh fruits and vegetables. The store has a lot of really cool promotions where if you spend over $50, you do get a free ride home. So it's things like that can be done on a great grand scale like that, or your smaller local level of the community gardens. It's a massive scale of things that can change. And, this is something that needs to be done in order for us to see a change and a difference, and increasing that awareness, and eliminating food deserts, because they really are unnecessary. These are ways to distribute healthy food to everyone, and we just have to come up with better solutions for this problem. The gentleman that I was referring to earlier, I'm sorry, his name is Wendell Pierce. There is work to be done, and many times the solution is as easy as connecting local farmers with aldermen so that neighborhood pop-up farmers markets can be created. People deserve access to fresh foods all over this country. Fresh produce is available. Professionals and those in and out of the communities must work together to create solutions to get the food from the farm to the tables of as many families, senior citizens, and individuals living in food deserts as soon as possible. Again, thank you for viewing my presentation. I hope you took away some information and maybe got inspired to do something locally in your neighborhood. Thank you. Have a great day.